This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas. Ahoy! Captain David Gallimore welcomes you aboard the Regenerate Show, live Mondays, 10 a.m. Pacific on K4HD Radio at k4hd.com. We dive into the real messy work of transforming our lives, leadership, and organizations. Bring your hot mess and confusion. Leave with clarity, courage, and confidence. Together, let's strengthen our resilience, accelerating the health of ourselves, people, planet, and profits. Now, here's your host, Captain Dave, your personal regenerator. All aboard!
Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of the Regenerate Show. Our theme this week is Lessons That Travel Home. My guest is Mike Chodroff, one of my best regenerative life, leadership, and career coaching clients ever. We're going to be discussing his messy middle of his personal and professional transformation, how he pivoted from being a very accomplished private school teacher, administrator, an advocate for sustainability and regeneration, and welcome all to Earth Week. Thanks, Mike, for reminding me of that. Hopefully we can all appreciate our Mother Earth, even just a little bit more today and throughout the week. He then was co-founder and executive director of the Ripple Center, which helped youth get a leg up with mentoring and entrepreneurship and discovering how they might look at small business as a path forward in their lives. I found him on startups.com, where he was facilitating a regenerative and sustainability business community of practice. And there's something about Mike, as you get to know him, you're going to get to know him and love him as much as I do, because he is the most authentic and vulnerable person I think I've met in a long, long time. And smart, oh my gosh, smart. I turn to Mike when I try to make sense of this crazy world that we're living in. In fact, we had a great chat over the weekend about a podcast that I had listened to about the U.S., Iran, Israel, and Middle East challenges, as well as challenges of our youth, which we're going to be talking about shortly. And what Mike really leaned in on with me was rediscovering, I think he knew his core values, but he really leaned in to see if those were really true for him and discovered some new ones. We'll be talking about the power of core values, as well as his Ikigai, his reason for being, and how he attracted, I think, a really, really compelling career for him. He's starting where everybody has to start, at the beginning, but he's got so many strategic ideas and fascinating, ambitious plans for this organization that he'll be telling us a little bit about. So without further ado, please welcome Mike Chodroff.
Hey, David. Hello there. Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. It's from my heart to yours and the audience. Love your background. Tell us a little bit about where that was taken, because you're quite a photographer, your lessons that travel.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and again, in appreciation of Earth Week, and as a lifelong environmental educator at my core, and of course, appreciator and steward, I decided to throw this background up today. This was taken a couple years ago, my 50th birthday. Did a little cruise with my mom and my sister to Nova Scotia, and this was just this beautiful spot. Everything was in full bloom, and wanted to share it with you and with the audience today.
Yeah, that's so appropriate. I really appreciate it. And what a blast of colors. My goodness. So we always like to start off the show with what's that one thing that you love to do that lights you up more than anything else?
Oh gosh, to be honest, get outside. I just there is an energy that goes right to my soul when I'm outside. Um, always talk about, and you said in your introduction about uh, empowering youth and just all of the different things going on in the world. Sometimes it is so important to disconnect in order to reconnect. And I find that when I am, immersed in nature and of course surrounded by people, and we are nature at our core, it just allows me to have things melt away, to find those little miracles everywhere because they are everywhere, and just appreciate. And sometimes I have to admit, I will have technology with me so I could take some great pictures, but just appreciate the things that we're surrounded by.
I love that. And you've captured quite a bit of your travels in the Lessons That Travel Substack that you write, um, more frequently than I write in my Substack. So good on you. So
Yeah.
before you became this global education advisor in your current role, before founding and leading the Ripple Center, before your private school teaching and advocacy for the environment, tell us a little bit about what forged you. What's your origin story, my friend?
Great question. Well, if you'll indulge me, David, since again it is Earth Week, I figured I wanted to frame my origin story with a tree as a metaphor because I feel like that's what I am now. It's what you are, what we are. We're trees in some ways. My life has branched out in so many different directions, both above ground, what the world sees, and of course below ground, what I know that exists. Um, some branches are still growing, others are a little stunted, some have stopped growing altogether. But these branches, all of them exist because of opportunity I've pursued, some by fate, some as a result of the weather, good and bad. Um, and then at the core of it, there's my trunk, my foundation, right? This solid through line. And that is my why, right? My seed, the one that continues to spread through roots and branches. Um, if you had asked me 3 months ago, what's my why? And I know we've had this conversation, I would have said the same thing that I've been saying for years, and it would have just been people and planet. But really, my why, it's a little deeper than that. I think the people and planet is a result of my why, which is curiosity, connection, and stewardship. Um, and because of those, I have multiple origin stories, right? Where each branch has split becomes a new origin. So discovering the physical world around me, the people that inhabit it, the opportunities to exact change, to travel, to educate, to regenerate my own mind and soul. And I can't dismiss the fact that no matter how far out my branches go or how high they go, that leaf at the top spot is still connected and communicating with the root that is the furthest underground. So that, in conjunction with the theme of your podcast and of our conversation, this entire tree is the messy middle. That dash that we see on headstones between the year of birth and death, like that's the messy middle. And here's the thing, messy can be beautiful. It mostly is. And I think the difference between sustainability and regeneration is just that, right? That to me, the word sustainable kind of implies being a little sterile, right? So the synonyms for it are to sustain, to maintain, to continue, to endure. Whereas regenerate, that implies renewal and revitalization and rejuvenation. So if I had chosen to live a sustainable life, right now I'd be working in television, I'd still be in the closet, and I would be insulated by living and socializing in communities that were mostly white, Jewish, and middle class. But curiosity, connection, and stewardship allowed me to travel a very circuitous path and grow all these branches in different directions. So I could certainly get into the some of the major decisions that happened along the way. And the very ones, it's funny, a lot of people go through life and they go, oh, things happen for a reason. But then they have to try to sit and dissect in that moment. What was the reason? What was the reason? You introduced me to a great book, right? The Surrender Experiment and the Soul Untethered by Michael Singer. And it reinforced and reminded me of this whole idea of we don't have control over what happens to us. What we can control with practice is how we react to those things, right? So we don't need to figure out what was the reason this happened in that moment, because sometimes that won't reveal itself for a few years from now. So, growing up, just my brief, real, the physical origin story, I had always wanted to be in television from the time I was a kid. It was just something I wanted to do. I love telling stories. I love writing. I love putting together stories. And I wanted to be a part of that magic that, puts stories out there. Fast forward, ended up at Rutgers, broadcast journalism, New York City is my background. And while I was doing a couple of internships, I also had a couple pivotal people that came into my life. Richard Hefner, he was the first chairman of the Movie Ratings Board, had a show on Channel 13 PBS called The Open Mind. And his whole class was communication and human values. 15 students, conversations each week for 3 hours on a Monday morning about books we had read. And another professor who only taught, I think, 2 semesters at Rutgers, happened to have him in a summer class, Alfred Edmond Jr., who was editor at large, or is to this day, of Black Enterprise magazine. And he opened up my eyes to the broken system of journalism and the portrayal of people of color and minorities in the media. So while I had these 2 individuals, I now was also experiencing firsthand what it was like to be in the television studios. And long story short, the amount of sexism and racism that was built into the culture of television was beyond what I wanted to contribute to. And despite the fact that this was my dream, it was all I had thought about for 12 plus years, I knew that in that moment I had to decide, did I want to live a life that was focused on my wants and needs, or did I want to focus on a life that was going to contribute to the greater good? And so I ultimately made the decision to not go into television after graduation. And this decision was made maybe weeks, a month before I graduated. So naturally, what did I do? I went and got my Series 7, became a financial planner, right? And again, I could ask myself the question at the time, why am I going into sales? What am I going to need to know all this sales? I was dealing with a lot of people's finance, and it was one of the greatest educations I ever had, and one of the few real educations I ever had about financial literacy. And I was one of the last rookies standing, but I also began to realize that I am putting people in investments, and this is mid-late 90s, into investments that went against my own environmental values. And at that time, there were no green funds and, alternative investments. So after 9 months, 10 months, I said to my boss, thank you for this opportunity, but I am going to be moving on to my next career. And when he said, what's that? I said, I have no idea, but it just isn't this. So long story short, I decided to become an entrepreneur, started a small publishing company, um, did unofficial guides to colleges. First one I did was the Rutgers Students Unofficial Guide to College. At the time, it was the fastest selling trade book in Rutgers history. And I was planting trees to offset the printing of the books in 1998, 1999. Again, my trunk that I was growing and these branches were really about my why, right? I was curious to learn more about different people, different industries. I wanted to make connections that were authentic, but I also wanted to make sure I was stewarding um, wherever, all the ground that I walked upon. So after doing that for a couple of years, I realized it wasn't quite what I wanted to do. And I always said I was going to go back after I retired from television and go into education. At the time, I had actually been running some youth groups at my synagogue. I had been doing some teaching. I was a camp counselor. I said, why not, let's go into education a little sooner than later. And did my student teaching, was student teaching fifth grade. The first week of my student teaching was September 11th. which was an amazing lesson in how important social emotional learning and safety, the feeling of safety in the classroom, especially as a brain science, is essential for learning anything else. And ended up teaching fifth grade in the public schools in New Jersey. And what was great, though, is I was able to incorporate my experiences in television, in entrepreneurship, in finance into the classroom. And one of the projects I did with students was, hey, let's take the curriculum we've been given and up it. I want you all to learn how to start an impact business. I want to talk about budgeting. I want to talk about mission statements. I want to talk about, all of the things you're going to need to know. And that was the seed that ultimately led to me starting the Ripple Center. So I'll stop there for a moment and see if you want to ask me any questions, because I know you and I have had amazing dialogues that go in different directions, but you can see already, like, this path, even though it might not make sense while you're on it, it's all connected.
Well, three things that I'd love to just pull a couple threads quickly. One, love the metaphor of the tree. And as you and I both know, there's so much magic that's in the soil under, not visible, as trees communicate to one another, trees communicate to other, fungus and mycelium and all sorts of other chemistry, the magic of that. And so I suspect that community is a big part of your origin story as well. I know you spoke a little bit about that, but I think during these challenging times for young people, who are often on their smartphones, and I have to catch myself, it's so easy, isn't it, to forget that we're better together. We're kind of pack animals. And so what you did in 9/11, that first day of teaching, oh my gosh, dealing with that situation and really honoring people's emotions, that just speaks volumes to me, because most new teachers, as I've been told, they follow the lesson plan that's been given them, and that's not you. So I love how you innovated in the moment and created that psychological safety for your students to work through that. So that's the second thread. And the third thread that I wanted to pull was how what wise advice about, it's really fraught, I think, to try to figure out your why in the moment. But instead, you listen to your heart, I suspect, and your head, and you made these. I'm a sailor, so you made these tacks. You pivoted to quite different career and job interests, but then to be able to integrate those various interests, and then looking kind of in the rearview mirror, say, oh yeah, look, that's the theme that kind of weaves these experiences. It's about learning. It's about sharing what you learn. I know that you are an educator, in your DNA. You love to learn, you love to share what you learn, and to create community around that learning. So that's my kind of quick recap of this origin story so far. Did I get that? Anything wrong? Correct me if I
No,
misread.
that was a great synopsis.
Okay.
And there's so many little pieces that would be so easy to dismiss and ignore. Um, and again, even the environmental and the social justice piece, those, when you are vulnerable and authentic with who you are and what you want to see and do in the world, there is a real attraction. And, long story short, once I started exploring in the public schools, these projects, I asked myself, is there a such thing as a green school? Like, are people doing green schools? Well, I ended up going one summer on one of my travels to Columbia ice fields up in Canada. And I'm talking to a gentleman who notices my Acadia National Park jacket. And we are talking, we get off this vehicle and see that the ice melt is just flowing down the glacier. And I said, geez, students need to know about this stuff. I'd love to open a green school one day. And he goes, oh, you should talk to my sister. She works at a school called the Willow School in New Jersey. Well, that was the school I had been researching, and that is where I ended up teaching for 5 years. And so, right, like I could have just said, oh, thanks, sounds great. But, you have to be open to conversation, to meeting people, to talking in order for opportunities to kind of reveal themselves.
Well, what a great pivot, I think, to this second third of our conversation, which is how did we meet and what was it that you were really looking for from our collaboration, so that you could integrate all of the experiences you'd had up to that point, but now wanting to have a little bit more predictable cash flow and income, maybe some benefits, because your work at the Ripple Center, though it fed your heart, with funding ups and downs because of government priority changes and things, it's hard to sustain a nonprofit. So do you want to talk a little bit about how that first conversation that we had when I was walking the dogs, and a little bit about the work that we did together and how it helped?
Sure. So, and just quick brief background information. I after my career in education had made the decision based on the fact that I wanted to do something on my own again. Started the Ripple Center, which was a nonprofit organization for 18 to 24-year-olds who wanted to become social entrepreneurs. So how do you build a business, make all the profit you want, because that's what capitalism is, but at the foundation of it, not at the expense of people and planet. And when I was building this, I joined startups.com. Had a great relationship with the principals there, and they invited me in to start doing a workshop called People, Planet, Profit, to which, again, the universe works in the most amazing, beautiful, mysterious ways. You showed up at one of the workshops. And when you said that you were looking to explore the idea of regenerative coaching, I said, oh, it's so good to hear somebody talking about regeneration. I was talking about that years ago with my students, and regenerative practices, and even like a regenerative, being a regenerative human being. And I feel like in that instant, you said to me, you stayed after Mike, hey, would you want to just talk offline? Because I had mentioned that at that point also, the nonprofit I had started, the funding was, just not coming through, and I was going to probably be pivoting. So, yep, you, me, your dog's in the park. We were on the phone, and you essentially told me, your amazing background and the experience you had in your messy middle and career, and also the coaching you had been doing, so that I had never ever considered needing a coach, because I always felt like everything happened to me. Things just kind of flowed, that, I knew what my strengths are. but I was really trying to figure out how to align them with my next chapter. And you said, I can help you do that. And it was amazing because you and I started working together, and you really set me on um, a linear path of discovery, which I had all the pieces of, but I didn't have all the tools and I didn't have the framework. So, right, we revisited my personality assessments. We clarified my core values, which, by the way, I keep by my desk at all time. We refined my Ikigai, right? Like, you helped me to discover, along with, I have to say now, my chatbot, which was a great tool that you gave me for putting together information. That I know that my Ikigai is I thrive when empowering others to grow and aligning my work and values that regenerate both people and planet.
That is
So
so you. I love that. That just speaks exactly to who you are.
yeah, and you helped me realize it's not about searching for a job. I needed to do some ecosystem building, right? That I was looking for alignment, and that whatever the job was really more about a career that I could grow in. The fact that we were just speaking the same language and we had the same energy, and any variable that came up in our conversations we could talk about for 20 minutes or more.
Yeah,
It was a relationship.
two talkers are dangerous sometimes.
Yep. So, if you're in the messy middle of reinvention, I can say from experience, having someone like David walking alongside you will change that trajectory.
Thank you. And just for our audience's sake, Ikigai is a Japanese framework, and it's kind of 4 circles that are connected like a Venn diagram, if you remember your old high school math. What are you really gifted at doing? What are you passionate about? What does the world need at this time? And how can you be well compensated? And compensation can be monetarily, but as Mike has been describing, finding the form that really lights him up and fed your head and heart needs. And when those 4 circles are as close together as possible and aligned, to your point, I think you do make your work your play. Now, it was a very challenging time to be looking and attracting a new experience, and you went through, my gosh, the roller coaster of emotions for several weeks. And I since learned, Mike, that it was a really, really difficult time because of all of the uncertainty in the business world. People that are hiring are kind of putting that hiring on pause because they don't know about the tariffs. They don't know about other government policies that might influence whether they should hire or not. The whole generative AI. Can organizations not hire right now while they explore generative AI? So there were a lot of headwinds that you had to overcome. And I have to say to my listeners that, Mike, you were perhaps the most persistent that I've ever met, even better than me. And I'm pretty darn persistent. But you found a way. And I think many of our conversations were me just saying, keep going, my friend. Never surrender. Never give up. And you didn't. And you attracted a lot of interesting opportunities, but nobody was kind of willing to pull the trigger until, and if you want to allow what you've discovered, the form currently that your career and job is taking. Do you want to describe a little bit about that? And then we'll jump to a commercial just shortly.
Sure. Yeah, what you said, it's funny, David, before coming on, I just wanted to quickly go back and review some of the process that I was with you through. And for each application, I created a folder. I had over 100 folders of places that I had targeted, and places that I had interviewed for and made it, a few rounds in. But ultimately, what was great is that I was looking to target the space, the industry, the form that I really wanted to be in, and not just apply to everything. And that was something that was at the intersection of education, of travel, of stewardship, of people connection, and I ended up with CIEE, the Council on International Education Exchange, as a global education advisor. So I have the opportunity now to help young people. Specifically, I'm in their high school division, study abroad with the help of scholarships and the ability to transform their own lives.
That, I think, is such a great fit for you at this time. And I think also what I hear from how you're approaching this work, you're really creating community. You're inviting alumni of the CIEE experience, because you've not been on one of these, youth programs through CIEE. So you're really being a good, I think, orchestrator of an experience to help potential high schoolers that might be open to summer experiences or a week-long experience. And you're inviting the alumnus to talk about what it really was like. And in the process, you're reconnecting the alumni to CIEE while you're helping create these new tree branches, or maybe more roots, tree roots, across all the schools that you go into. Is that sound like I'm overselling this idea of community?
No, that's absolutely a key component of it. I mean, I always said if I could have a business card that just said, professional connector, that's what I would do. So I now get to, I'm immersing myself in an existing community. I'm growing the community, but looking for ways to make sure that the members of the community stay connected. So it's through the teachers, the counselors, the administrators, the alumni, the potential participants, the guardians. All of these individuals create this community of global opportunity.
And what's, I think, so powerful of what you've just shared is you're not really selling these travel experiences. You're inviting people to experience, even though they're not physically doing the travel, but through the power of storytelling and the alumni and your own stories about your own travels, just maybe not CIEE, that were, you've not done one of those programs, but you've done many others, and you've led student programs, environmental and other learning travel. And the young people that are listening in the audience, they're going, "Oh, this would be so cool. I want to be a part of this." And they basically, they sell themselves on the program.
Yeah, and it's there's that element, and then there's also the flip side that I'm learning is that I'm working with a lot of students that come from under-resourced communities, that come from challenging financial backgrounds, and they have convinced themselves that this is something they can't do, that they're not going to be able to afford to do it, or just the experience itself is going to be too much. I had this when I was in Pittsburgh last week. I was invited by someone who runs an organization for children that have housing insecurity issues, that are either couch surfing, they're homeless, they are staying with other relatives, and they have this safe space that they could come to a few times a week, a teen night, and just learn from a lot of other different people. They get help with guidance and counseling and writing backgrounds, but they're all enrolled in high schools. So he said to me, "Mike, I want you to come and just meet the community, You could talk to the students. So I got to sit down, David, and just ask these students like, hey, look at this map. Do you have a dream maybe of spending 3 to 4 weeks in the summer at one of these places? Tell me about it. And so when you start having these conversations and saying to a young person, one of the kids, I said this exact thing. He's like, oh, this isn't something that I can't leave. I can't go there. And I said, why not? He's like, oh, I don't know. And I said, let me ask you a question. Do you like apples? He said, yeah, I like apples. And I said, well, where do apples grow? He's like, well, on trees. And I said, where on the tree? And he said, the branch. And I said, well, listen, my friend, sometimes you need to go out on a limb because that's where the fruit is, right? Lean into discomfort because that is where learning takes place for us, for you, for everyone.
Yeah. Such a powerful metaphor, my friend. That is awesome. Well, hey, take a minute and a half-ish and tell us a little bit about if I was a parent, for example, and my child had just been part of your community for a half hour, 45 minutes at my school, at the kids' school. What would you want to tell me?
Sure. So I'll lay the foundation of, like, again, CIEE is the Council on International Education Exchange, a nonprofit organization that serves study abroad students in high school, which is the division I'm in, and college, international exchange visitors, and also educators teaching abroad. And the mission has remained the same. And I'm going to read it verbatim. It's to help people gain understanding, acquire knowledge, and develop skills for living in a globally interdependent and culturally diverse world through meaningful exchange programs. So what I love is the organization was actually founded in 1947 as a direct result of World War II. At that time, the question was asked, like, what are we going to do to be able to create lasting peace in the world? And the answer was, we need to send students and teachers abroad to have firsthand experiences with people in other nations, to become better global citizens and ambassadors for America. So the first group of students and teachers that actually traveled to Europe went on decommissioned naval ships that were going to pick up American soldiers returning from the war. Now, 80 years later, right, CIEE has centers around the globe. And again, I'm going to speak on behalf of the high school division this summer. So the high school division started 10 years ago with 40 students. And this summer, we'll be sending over 5,000 students to study in 3 to 4 week programs. And we distributed nearly $15 million in scholarships. So students can choose from over 140 different courses covering language immersion, arts and culture, STEM, business, social change. And when I tell you this is the opportunity I wish existed when I was in high school, you know, now in my new role as a global education advisor, I have Pennsylvania and Delaware are all the schools I cover. I get to provide students the opportunity to discover themselves and connect more deeply with people and cultures through global experiences and education. So I encourage everyone to go to CIEE.org to find out more. It really is, again, like, how do you connect with people on a personal level? And it's by leaning into discomfort, having curiosity, wanting to make connection, and then stewarding those relationships.
Wow. I tell you, it brings back such fond memories of when, between my junior and senior year in college, I wrote an essay and was invited to spend 5 weeks with 50 Americans and 50 Japanese for 5 weeks as part of the Japan America Student Conference, which, like CIEE, was founded shortly after the Japan American conflict. And peace through mutual understanding is the motto of JASC, Japan America Student Conference. And to this day, Mike, those relationships that I developed and the insights that I still draw inspiration from, I mean, it was transformational.
Yep. Absolutely. And again, David, all of the ability to surrender, even though I didn't know I was surrendering when I was younger. Now the wisdom, the experience, the maturity, and we still struggle with it, right? When things happen, I need an active reminder to, like, hey, take a breath, like breathe, like let's decompress, let's understand that stuff happens. But all of those experiences, um, what I'm doing now, I don't think I could do as well without all of the things that happened in the past, right? Even the exposure, like to, with all of the traveling that I've done, both domestically and abroad, the meeting people, the not being afraid to not know something and to go and ask, or to maybe there's someone that has a different point of view that you do, a different culture, a different background. But for me to be able to say to myself, there was a mentor that once said to me, and I love this. He said, look, we know the things that we know. I know that I can speak intermediate Spanish. There's also the things that I know I don't know. I know that I can't speak a lick of Arabic. And then there's the things I don't know that I don't know. There are things that I don't even know that I don't know. But unless I ask you questions and I don't go into a conversation to win, but I go into it to learn, that is like where the magic happens. And if it's okay, I'll transition into the story I've shared with you. And that's the other thing I loved about our coaching, David. It evolved into a friendship, because when I went into this coaching, I'm like, how am I going to get this guy to find me a job? And it was really about, how am I going to give this guy a window into my soul so he can help me realize where I need to be? And your listening skills and your open-mindedness, right, is what allowed me also to say, like, oh, guess what? Like, there are so many opportunities here. But one of the stories I shared with you along the way is that, right, I'm a liberal Jewish guy, and regardless, and it doesn't matter religion, the stuff that's going on in the Middle East, I think, has impacted a lot of people, spiritually, personally, emotionally, etc. And in a post-October 7th world, right, I'm supposed to be blanket upset with Palestinians and with, Muslim extremists and, etc. Well, I had found a connection online through technology, and one of the things it said in this person's profile was that he was a proud Palestinian. But I knew that there was connection there because I was looking for, certain work in technology, and this is what he was offering. I said, you know what? I have two choices right now. I could just say, moving on to the next person and keep it easy, or I'm going to reach out. Well, this individual is one of my absolute best friends now. Like, absolute best friends. We talk almost every day. And it was because when we first connected, it had nothing other to do than with the shared humanity that we have. What is life like for you in your home? Tell me about your nieces and your nephews and your siblings and your relatives that have moved to the United States. Tell me, what are the challenges that you guys face as a family? And then it's like, oh, can I ask you a few questions about what's going on? And suddenly you realize that, there's no black and white to all this, because there are some, just like there are people, not every American is the same, right? Not every American has the same opinions. So he and I joke around now. At the end of most conversations, we go, humans, right? Humans. Everybody is an individual. And when I remove all those labels from somebody and just want to learn about them as an individual, are there going to be things that, yeah, maybe we don't see eye to eye on? Sure, right? But when you start to immerse yourself in other cultures, in other religions, in other, name the demographic, right? Name it. You realize at the end of the day, most people just want the same thing, right? They want what's best for their families. They want to live peaceful, happy lives. They want to be able to afford to live. They want to connect with other people. And there's so much beauty in that. And going back to what you were saying, David, earlier with the technology and how people feel, we're in an algorithm, right now, and we're going to be fed what this algorithm sees that we're going to consume the most. We have to find a way to break the algorithm, right? Go to, even if it means forcing yourself to just go to other sites, other opinions, and maybe it's hard to digest, but we can't live in bubbles. And that's, again, what I love about the new role that I have, is that I am helping young people to go to a new location, meet students from around the country that are part of our program, live with a host family or in some group housing, immerse themselves in the culture, and suddenly forget all of that. It's those other skills, which is what I love writing about in my Lessons That Travel Substack. It's those other things that you bring home with you that are about, wow, I had to lean on figuring out how to communicate differently. I had to problem solve when I didn't know where I was or what I was doing. I had to get out of my comfort zone and ask for help. I realized that the stranger is now my friend, right? One of my favorite things, I think, Abraham Lincoln, when he was trying to talk about support for the Civil War, he had said something about one of the goals really should be is meeting with the other side. How are we going to connect with them? And somebody said, wait a second, Mr. Lincoln, isn't our goal to destroy our enemies? And he said, the way we destroy our enemies is by making them our friends.
So if you were to give advice to middle schoolers, high schoolers, university, technical college, trade school, young people about breaking the simulation, breaking out of smartphone and social media, get outdoors, what else would you want for our next generation of leaders to do next?
Oh my, there's a litany of upgrades and changes. There's some things we're doing really well, but I think for one, we have to recognize, and I think that is, I was so fortunate to innately recognize that every single student I talked to was their own unique individual, and that not everybody learned the same way. Not everybody was interested in the same things. Yes, my job was to expose them to as much as possible, to help them determine what it was that they may or may not be interested in, to try it. They would discover new things. But I, when I left the public school arena to go into independent schools, it was because I was seeing the writing on the wall and I was afraid of all of the testing that was coming down the pipeline, right? Testing standardized, and by the word standardized means everyone fits into the same standard, right? Standardized testing about certain subjects. And then once those things are tested, and if funding, if teacher evaluations, right, if all of that is determined by the results of this test, well, where is there room then for music and arts and culture and the art of communication, and even, like I said, media literacy and financial literacy and all of the things that, young people need to be exposed to growing up, global citizenship. These are huge, huge topics. And I think that if we could find a way to figure out other ways to assess students on how they're doing. There's ways to use portfolios and to put together a full package. Is it going to be a little more work? Absolutely. But is there any more important job than being an educator of young people?
Yeah. Mike, our time always flies when you and I chat. I'm so grateful for your wisdom today and being so authentic and vulnerable in your own story. So for our next port of call, our theme is adapting to grief. And my dear college buddy and dear friend, Chris Dici, is going to be talking about his personal transformation as a result of the death of both his talented and troubled son, Diego, as well as his beautiful and talented wife, Anna. So please join us for episode 12 next Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and 6 p.m. Central European Time on k4hd.com, as well as on your favorite podcasts a couple days later. On behalf of Mike Chodroff, our producer, Rebel Medler, and our entire Talk4Media team, please stay healthy, stay safe. We need you. Hey, consider taking one next action from what Mike and I were conversing about, getting outdoors maybe, or talking to an old friend, or making a new friend, being curious. We're better together.
Thank you for listening to Regenerate with Captain Dave on K4HD Radio. We invite you to give yourself grace and embrace the messy middle. See you every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Until then, you got this.